Hey everyone, Luca from Peer3. Today we're doing a brief video to cover the tech behind our SDK, specifically our first shared security implementation, which we've named State Channels Plus. It's a protocol that builds on top of the base idea of state channels and extends it with additional logic. I'll try and explain everything in simple terms, but mostly for today's video we're targeting engineers. A brief overview of the SDK. Currently, it's blockchain based, but we have plans to support also DAGs, directed acyclic graphs, to have things like parallel updates through a conflict-free replicated data type. We did design it to be VM agnostic, but currently we only have the EVM implemented, and we'll mostly focus today on optimistic consensus, liveness, timeout, and virtual voting, understanding how these things work together to get the properties that we are interested in. The SDK is designed to support general arbitrary state machines, meaning smart contracts. We did not pick a niche like payments. We're building for general computation. And when everything runs peer-to-peer, it executes in real time without any fees. And this is a brief overview of the system. You have peers connected directly to one another. They form their own isolated groups, as they call partitions or shards. They all commit to follow the same predefined logic, some smart contract, and they post the commitment on chain. This is essentially their promise that they will honor the terms of the contract and execute everything faithfully peer-to-peer. And from that point, everything is offloaded peer-to-peer. So we want to have as much of the peer-to-peer execution as possible, since that is in real time without any fees. But at all times, we want to guarantee correctness and trust, ultimately to be enforced by a distributed ledger, also known as blockchain. So regarding our consensus, we didn't implement a classical variation of a Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus algorithm, since we couldn't guarantee that within a partition we would have less than 1/3 of Byzantine peers. And we had a strong design principle to allow everyone to connect freely with anyone and to rely that the system will just work. So we implemented optimistic consensus, which is essentially something like, hey, let's cooperate because it's in our best interest to do so. And if we fail to cooperate for whatever reason, then we have additional fees to pay on chain. So let's take a look at an example. So let's say it's peer A's turn to produce a block. It produces block X and signs it, and it gossips everything to other peers, peer B and peer C. Within some agreement time, which is like a parameter defined for every application within the SDK, peer A expects to receive all of the signatures confirming its block, and if that happens, yay, the optimistic consensus worked, and we just continue, everybody cooperated, and we just continue building peer-to-peer. If for any reason a single signature is missing, let's say peer B didn't want to cooperate, peer A is forced to post the call data of the block on chain. Keep in mind that posting call data is a lot cheaper than essentially doing the on-chain execution and modifying storage slots. But at the same time, since now peer A has economic costs, it will decide to not cooperate further with peer B. However, the call data is posted, which is important for our next slide when we talk about liveness, timeout, and virtual voting. So even when peers don't want to cooperate, the consensus has failed, the blockchain will enforce correctness, security, and liveness. In this example, we have 4 peers, A, B, C, and D. And for some reason, peer D doesn't want to cooperate with the other peers. And this is the current snapshot. So we have 3 blocks ordered by A, B, and C. Everybody else cooperated and signed, and we are missing peer D signatures. So what happens now is if you use something like a round robin leader election, at this point, peer D has 2 options. It either produces a block and posts it on chain as call data, which will directly be linked to the previous block, which is like a virtual vote. It votes for it in its entire history. So even if it doesn't sign it directly, it signs it indirectly. So this state is finalized. And the other case is Peer3 just doesn't want to produce a block and just goes offline or whatever reason. So after some time, any peer can just invoke timeout on chain and remove Peer3 from the state channel. So 3 peers remain, 3 signatures are there, the state is finalized, and they just continue building on top. For this, we use the on-chain clock. It's the single source of truth, and everybody tries to mimic the blockchain clock for this. Regarding disputes, disputes are a very important part of the system. They're designed to rarely trigger, but they're there to guarantee some game theoretic properties and to enforce, of course, correctness. This is how you enforce things in the end. So disputes are designed, like the rest of the system, to be lightweight and execute optimistically and recursively. So when peer A detects some fraud from any other peer, it creates a dispute locally and proofs locally, and runs the dispute also locally to produce an output state. It wraps all of this together and signs it, and posts this as call data on chain. It essentially also commits to it, and this is the on-chain timestamp. Other peers it also gets emitted, so other peers get to see the dispute and check, do things add up? Is this a valid dispute? If it's not a valid dispute, it will go down the invalid path, and a peer can invoke on-chain execution where the blockchain would essentially step in, do all of the computation, and punish either peer A or peer B who lied. This is expensive, so no rational peer will try and cheat the system, but it is there to enforce correctness. And if it goes down the other path, like peer A in fact did post a dispute that was correct, it goes down the happy path, it is valid, but other peers will still ask, do they have more proofs to append to this dispute? Meaning, can they extend the pool of participants that were slashed, removed, or whatever? If the answer is yes, they would produce a recursive proof, build on top, do the exact same thing, just link also this proof, and it will go through the exact same mechanism. And in the end, if nobody can produce more proofs, they just accept the state as correct and continue building on top of that state. So I think these are some of the most important design decisions in our design. So everything remains lightweight. We use call data as much as possible and try to lower the on-chain footprint as much as possible. And yeah, in the end, we're enforcing on-chain correctness. So if for any reason anything was unclear or you have more questions, feel free to reach out. There'll be context in the description. And yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks.